Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your host, Bradley, and I want to welcome and thank each and every single one of you for tuning in today to the very first episode of A Grown Man's Diary. Today's episode is titled A Window into My Why. Now, I know it's in my trailer that hopefully some of you got to check out. A key aspect of this show moving forward is going to revolve around interviews, and that's absolutely the case. However, with today being our first time together, I really felt it was important for me to just take this as a chance to speak directly to you and open up and share with all of you my reasons for wanting to start this podcast in the first place, along with my experiences of being badly bullied throughout both elementary and middle school, to getting diagnosed with leukemia shortly after I started high school. And then just to put a nice big bow on everything, by the time I got to college, I was forced to really deal with all the mental health ramifications that stemmed from those traumatic events throughout my life. I mean, I did 4.5 years of chemo throughout some of the most socially developmental years of one's life. In high school, that's the time when you start to figure out who you are and what you believe in and really what you're all about. And that experience for me was completely contorted, because I was dealing with so many other things that your average high school student doesn't have to worry about or focus on. And I tell you all this not to feel bad for me, certainly not, but rather just to demonstrate the fact that throughout most of my life, in one way or another, I've been through a bunch of shit. I've been through the ringer. Yet despite all of it, despite everything I've gone through and continue to go through and deal with, I know I'm going to be okay. And I really hope I can use this podcast, this show, this voice as a means of helping some of you out there feel okay too. Because I know I am not the only one who feels the way that I do. And I'm absolutely not the only one who's dealing with mental health issues right now. As, in my case, depression and anxiety. So hopefully over time, my focus is to share my stories and honest take on life with all of you, in hopes of gaining your trust and empowering you to share your story when you're ready and in a way that you feel most comfortable with the people in your life. So you can, feel as though you are releasing some of that pressure that's building up inside of you. Now, because one of my main reasons for starting this podcast in the first place is to create a platform we can all use together to both elevate and normalize conversations regarding mental health and illness, I truly feel a great responsibility to be completely honest and transparent with you, the listener, throughout the entirety of this series. And yeah, that absolutely means I will be throwing myself under the bus plenty of times, especially when we're talking about relationships and dating and all of that stuff. But that's really the point. The point of this is for me to be as authentic with you as I would my own diary, journal, whatever you want to call it. Because the only way we're actually going to feel better is if we address these issues head on, have the difficult conversations, while also making sure that we're there for one another when one of us decides to open up. So in addition to elevating and normalizing conversations on both, again, mental health and illness, I'm also very focused on driving change that our kids can benefit from. And hopefully that will lead to them experiencing a lot less sleepless nights and what seem to be completely endless days that I know myself, and I'm sure a lot of you out there also are all too familiar with. Now, I don't have children. Shit, I can't even seem to get a girlfriend at this point, but I do intend on having kids one day. And in my opinion, the way things are right now, we are completely ill-prepared to properly groom and nurture our kids into being the happiest, healthiest, and most successful versions of themselves. I'll give you an example. Our current education system is set up to really just focus on the student instead of the actual child. I think we focus too much time and put too much emphasis on textbook academics, when really we should be putting our time and attention into nurturing our kids' confidence and emotional intelligence. Because ironically enough, us adults, we know those are the skills that are so much more important to actually achieving a happy, healthy, and successful life. And we know this from our experience. We know that throughout our personal and professional lives, when we know who we are, we have a sense of what we believe in, and thus a sense of self-worth and self-love, everything else is more manageable, when shit hits the fan, and more achievable when we're actually trying to accomplish something. So because of all of this, I really hope together we can start this conversation, which will hopefully lead to the revamping and restructuring of our early education system. Because I firmly believe that we as a society need to do a much better job when it comes to providing our kids the proper tools and resources they are going to need as they enter the quote unquote real world. Because we all know, and this might be why you are listening today, other than, supporting your boy, life throws a bunch of shit at you. And unfortunately, it will throw a whole heap load of crap at these kids as well. So, rhetorical question, but why wouldn't we do everything in our power to prevent these kids from experiencing any more hurt and pain than they're already going to? It's up to us, the adults, to really make the difference and provide our kids, the next generation, with a better life in a better world than we grew up in. This is our responsibility. And it's a big part of why I started this show, because honestly, I'll be damned if I don't do everything in my power to make this dream a reality. Not only for myself, certainly not only for myself, but for all of us, because we will all benefit from doing this. And the greatest beneficiaries will be our kids, my kids, your kids, all of our kids. And the truth of the matter is, that was all in a pre-COVID world. And that's what's so scary, because if we weren't prepared then to help our kids develop these critical skills they're going to need to actually be happy and live a healthy life, we're only that much more ill-prepared for a post-COVID world. So hopefully together we can, collaborate with one another and build this conversation to prepare ourselves as the adults, as both educators and parents. Again, I'm neither of those, but you get the point. To really prepare to be there for our, the kids, for when things do go back to normal. Because us adults, we're going to be able to flip that switch, and I can't wait to do it myself and just go back to normal. Be like, fuck yeah, we got this. Let's go back to normal life, leave all that behind us, forget about it, of course, other than the lives lost. But our kids, they won't be able to do that at all. They are going to be carrying this trauma with them for the rest of their lives in one way or another. They're going to be hurt badly by this. So again, as the people our kids depend on, it's up to us to work together and prepare one another so we can then be there to catch our kids when they need us most. And I know that's a tall order, but I believe that we are at a fork in the road right now. And we have a chance to hang right and prepare ourselves to be there for our kids, not only now in the moment, but when they do transition back into normal life and, the foreseeable future afterwards. Or we can go down the other path and do nothing and really just let our kids down. And I'm pretty sure all of you listening are on board with me when I say that that second option, the latter of doing nothing, is completely unacceptable and cannot happen. Because we are about to experience a simultaneous overflow of millions of kids' pent-up emotions and traumas all at the same time, which is something we've never experienced before. And ultimately, what that's going to lead to is the skyrocketing of horrific statistics on school violence and shootings, in-person and online bullying, and unfortunately, suicide. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, but over my life, I have felt a lot of pain. Yes, some definitely physical. But I would say that the vast majority of my pain, and definitely the worst of it, all came from within. And so in order to prevent our kids from developing the same underdeveloped headspace as again, only speaking for myself, as me, we really have to start being there for them right now. It will truly save their lives. So again, that's what this is all about. Not only helping normalize conversations on these topics and helping those out there who are currently feeling alone feel not so alone, and that they have somebody to talk to, and they do have a place that they belong, as well as a place of being understood. It's also to make a difference for our future, to change the world for our kids. And the only way to do that is by having these conversations. So quite honestly, I'm just looking to help as many kids as possible avoid feeling the way that I have felt for so long, and I'm sure so many of you have felt for so long. And frankly, at the end of all of this, if we're even able to help one kid, all of this is worth it. Now, the last thing I want to say in terms of my why of starting this show, before I dive a little deeper into my story, is that this podcast is really just one piece of a much larger puzzle that I'm currently working on. I don't know if any of you got a chance to check out my social posts, but if you did, you may have noticed that at the bottom of each one, there's a tag that reads, sponsored by the Be Kind company. Well, that company has been a long time dream of mine to start. And what it is a holistic health education company for kids with the sole purpose of both developing and providing students, parents, and educators with a wide range of fun and modern physical, emotional, and mental health services and products to really help get these kids the tools they need to develop these skills so they can then go on and live a happy, healthy life. I've been really scared to pursue this. Yet through a lot of self-talk and journaling, as well as meditating and deep conversations with people close to me, I've been able to develop the confidence needed to really just take this dive and a total chance on myself in hopes of not only proving to the world that I can do this, but more importantly, much more importantly, proving to myself that I can do this. So again, thank you all so much for your love and support and your words of encouragement as I begin this journey with all of you by my side. Because at the end of the day, I don't know what I'm doing. And I like to think of this as a fun microcosm of life. And I'm only speaking for myself, but I don't know what I'm doing in life. And I think a lot of us don't know what we're doing. And that's okay. Because as long as you approach something from a place of love and optimism and just giving it your best, which is really all we can ever do in any given situation, there's not too much that can go wrong. I mean, yes, sometimes things work out and sometimes not so much, but through all of it, as long as we learn and grow and hopefully avoid making the same mistakes more than once, it should hopefully be all worth it. So if you are sitting on a dream or an idea of yours that up until this point you've been too scared to pursue, take it from me and just do it. Just jump. Talk to a few friends to reassure yourself that you do have that love and support to back you up. But the worst that can happen is if you fail, you pick yourself back up, try some other way, and get back to it. Because I promise you, you will always regret not pursuing that dream of yours so much more than you ever would if you were to have pursued that dream and failed in the process. So now that we've gone over my whys, I want to awkwardly shift gears and begin to share more of my story and touch on some key events that I believe have led me to who I am today. But before I do that, I just need to get this disclaimer out there in front of all of you. And what that is that all of my stories and thoughts or perspectives on any topic are simply my own. And therefore, I only speak for myself and from my interpretation of any event. And I say this not to belittle where I'm coming from, but just to acknowledge that there are always going to be, additional sides to every story. And, I'm not here to convince you of anything, nor am I here to play the victim. I don't believe that gets us anywhere. And on top of all of that, the choice of doing this so publicly was a decision that I made on my own. I did not consult with anybody. And therefore, out of respect to them, I will not be sharing the names of anybody from my past, regardless of who they are and what role they may have played, because I am not looking to blow up anybody's spot or call people out. Honestly, it's really quite the opposite. My entire life philosophy is that everything happens for a reason, and therefore, all the events that I've experienced, whether they be good or bad, and the people that I've encountered, regardless of duration of a relationship, they've all played a key role in my life story. And therefore, I can only approach this from a place of gratitude and appreciation for them and for their participation, for you and your participation. And so, I ask that if you hear a story throughout the course of this series, as you hopefully follow along, and you notice that, oh shit, like he's talking about somebody, if you know who that character is, I just ask that you also respect the privacy of others and just please avoid doing anything that could directly or indirectly put a spotlight on somebody who really didn't ask for it. We really just need to make sure that we are creating a place that is going to be supportive of one another and avoid doing anything that could hurt somebody or make somebody feel even worse than they may already feel. And I'm sure this goes without saying, but if you yourself are listening and realize you're a character in one of the stories I'm sharing, please know it's only because I took something valuable from it. It stuck with me for all the right reasons and had an impact on my life. So again, I'm only really appreciative of both that time we had together as well as for you for being a part of my life. I hold no ill will towards anybody from my past, and I promise you I will do everything I can to ensure that I'm always coming across as such. Now, in terms of my story, I acknowledge how lucky I am and have been my entire life. I was born into a very loving, supportive family. And yeah, money didn't grow on trees, but my parents always went above and beyond to give my older brother and I everything we could want and need. Growing up, I was a typical sports-loving, happy, energetic, Energizer Bunny kid. But beneath the surface, I was always very concerned with what others thought about me. I lived in this steady state of desperation, always needing the approval and love of those around me, not just my family and friends, but strangers. It was all consuming. It controlled everything that I did. And it's still a thorn in my side today. And I know it's well rooted in the fact that throughout large parts of both elementary and middle school, I was really badly bullied, both physically and emotionally. I convinced myself the only way to avoid becoming a target is to just blend in and make sure everybody likes me. Between kindergarten and third grade, I was sent to see a psychiatrist on a regular basis because, well, I wasn't eating or sleeping or really just functioning normally as a kid because of this constant state of fear and anxiety that I was living in. All of this took place between the ages of 5 and 8 years old. Imagine that, a kid at that age not being a kid because they're too scared to eat or sleep or go to school and be with friends. This happens all the time, and it's heartbreaking, and it needs to stop. Our kids need to be able to be kids. They need to be happy and carefree, creative and adventurous, all things that bullying kills immediately. Now, granted, all kids can be pretty tough at times, and this all took place when bullying was by no means at the top of mind for most people. It just wasn't such a hot topic like it is today. And I definitely don't blame anyone for what happened to me, especially the kids who bullied me. They were kids too, kids who were clearly hurting in their own way, but unfortunately, they weren't given the proper mentoring and skills they needed to understand what it is they were feeling and going through, and really how to properly cope and open up about what it is that they were hurting from. And this really just speaks to the importance of not only helping those getting bullied and, the victims of bullying, but also the bully themselves, because at that age, yes, they might know it's not right, but it's their only means of expressing how they're feeling and likely releasing the pressure that's building up inside of them. So if we help them channel that energy and everything else going on in another way through education and providing them resources and so on, they're going to be a lot less likely to end up bullying. So again, we can attack this issue from multiple ends in a way that is only beneficial, educational, and supportive of both the child who is being bullied as well as the child who is bullying, because they themselves are clearly hurting and need love and support as well. Now, fast forward with me to 7th grade. Here I am, 11, 12 years old or so, and I am for the first time experiencing the true darkness of depression and suicidal thoughts. I don't really remember how this all played out, or came to be, I should say. But the kid who ended up using me as this human punching bag for so long, I didn't even know. We were a grade apart and in no way within the same social circles. It made no sense, especially at the time. But it caused me to think that this type of stuff was going to always happen to me. I was always going to be a target. So here I was, 11, 12 years old, getting the shit kicked out of me on a very regular basis, almost every day, depending on, the week. And I was thinking about killing myself because I didn't see this ever ending. I was just getting beat up regularly. I was being punched and kicked and thrown into lockers, humiliated in front of everybody. It was awful. I felt worthless. I felt like I was the blame, though, again, I didn't know why. But it was so extreme for so long. and with no real explanation, that I needed to create one for myself in order to give way to even the possibility of coming to terms with what I was up against. I've spent so much time going through these mental archives of my life, trying to figure out what it is I did to always be the person, or, well, so I felt, that people just constantly wanted to pick on. Why it was that I seemed to always walk around with a big old target on my back. This has been a major weight on my shoulders for so long, and honestly has stuck with me to this day. Much of my current need, or rather desire, to constantly win the approval of others has severely impacted my life. I have avoided taking chances on myself out of fear of humiliation. As mentioned earlier, this podcast and the Be Kind Company is a perfect example of that. I have avoided speaking up for and defending myself in both personal and professional situations out of fear of just upsetting somebody and losing being in their good graces. All of this is a partial but significant result of being bullied for so long at such a young age. My early years consisted of breaking down and dismantling my self-esteem when it really should have been the complete opposite. But none of this is to say that it's anybody's fault, because not only was I fortunate to be born into a great family, I was also educated throughout an incredible school system back in my hometown, where the teachers were literal angels. And so if any of them are listening to this, thank you for everything you did for me and all the other students. You know, my mom's a teacher, and I have so much respect for the people in that line of work because it's so difficult. And to see the sacrifice and the dedication these teachers put into every single one of their classes and each student every single day is just remarkable. And I have personally been the beneficiary of so much over-the-top love and guidance from so many teachers throughout my life. And none of this falls on anybody's shoulders, especially the shoulders of any of my former teachers. Which goes to show that this type of stuff can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter what type of family you were born into or how amazing your teachers might be. Any kid anywhere can find themselves a victim of bullying, especially now in a world where cyberbullying and communication is so difficult to detect and prevent, which is why I believe that in order to actually make true headway and lasting change in the fight against school violence and bullying, we need to cut the bullshit red tape that comes with our current means of discussing these topics, which is primarily the topic of gun control and the Second Amendment. And we need to have conversations that almost everybody can and should get behind, which is mental health and emotional intelligence education for kids instead of the divisive gun control conversation. Now, this isn't to say that gun control doesn't need to happen. I absolutely believe that it does. But so does so many other aspects of our society. You know, a large portion of Americans are hell-bent in living in the past and what used to be, instead of focusing on what is and what could be. And the perfect place to start that shift, in my opinion, is at our foundation, our future, which is, yep, you guessed it, our children and their education. So as much as getting bullied took its toll on me, there's nothing more influential in my life and my story than what happened to me my freshman year of high school. On the day before Thanksgiving in 2006, I was diagnosed with leukemia, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, or ALL. And before my diagnosis, I was an avid water polo player. I was very healthy, and all I wanted to do one day was play college ball. But that, along with the rest of my freshman year and any normalcy I expected to experience for the foreseeable future, was gone in an instant. I remember getting the news like it was yesterday. I was still partially drugged up as I was waking up from this bone marrow biopsy operation that I had just gone through. I was sore and groggy and surrounded by what seemed to be dozens of white coats, which I later found out were students because the hospital I was at was a teaching hospital. And so here these students were not only witnessing a unfortunate, heartbreaking diagnosis for a young man, but they were witnessing the death of a child's innocence, my innocence. At 14 years old, and within one single moment, a few words spoken from the doctor, my life was forever changed. At the end of his little speech to me and explaining everything that was going on, the doctor asked if I had any questions. And I was very much a deer in the headlights, but I was able to muster the courage to ask one. And that one question was, am I going to die? His response was appreciated. Tough, but appreciated. He said, "We're going to do everything we can to make sure that does not happen." So, of course, all I heard was maybe, but hopefully not. And it was only a few hours later that I found myself starting this, what would turn out to be 4.5 year battle, as I was getting hooked up to a neon Gatorade looking bag of chemo hanging from an IV pole that would basically become my shadow. I remember feeling terrified, but mostly pissed. All I wanted to do was feel better, go back to school, be with my friends, flirt with girls, and be 14. But that was never going to happen. And I would later find out that I would never go back to who I was before my diagnosis. My entire experience battling cancer was, as you can imagine, a total roller coaster ride, and not a good roller coaster. I mean, I experienced immense pain, some severe physical side effects, some of which are still with me today. But as I mentioned earlier, none of this pain, the physical pain I felt throughout my entire time going through chemotherapy and cancer, even holds a candle to the emotional pain and the trauma that was suppressed throughout all these years. And that was all despite the fact that I was surrounded constantly by love and support between my friends and family and teachers, as well as just the larger community. But I was still a teenager, and I couldn't help but feel that I was on my own island with no one to relate to me or understand what it is I was actually going through. I felt a constant need to always put on a brave face in hopes of avoiding anyone feeling more worried for me than they already were. I felt like I was a burden, and I refused to become more of one by opening up about how I felt emotionally. So it didn't matter that I was surrounded by love and support constantly, because I still felt so alone. And I really wish I knew then everything I know now about coping with trauma and overall mental health, because I would have been able to avoid so many dark, horrible times, because I was so focused on the physical health, on my physical health and recovery, and just really surviving throughout high school, that it wasn't until college when I was forced to really face all of this emotional baggage from my past. And when the time came, I was so ill prepared to deal with everything that it almost cost me my life. For any average 18-year-old who even has the slightest sense of who they are, transitioning to college can be pretty difficult. But for me, with having no sense of who I was, it was pretty impossible. I refused to let my parents know about this because I'm extremely stubborn, and I didn't want to admit that I couldn't handle college and or being on my own. But privately, I was a mess. I didn't know which direction to even go in terms of figuring out who I was. One half of me was so desperate to make up for lost time of high school that all I wanted to do was party, drink, and have a good time. Yet that would only lead to terrible mistakes and self-humiliation, because mentally I was so out of whack. Meanwhile, the other half of me was so desperate to just feel normal and find happiness, but I didn't know how to do that. I was so buried and disoriented in terms of who I was and what I was all about that I couldn't figure out where to even start. This path of self-discovery just eluded me. And it lasted for years. I was aimlessly wandering in pursuit of myself for so many years through college and post-college. But the difference is now that I stand on a foundation of substance, of knowing deep down to my core who I am and what I'm all about. Whereas back then, I didn't even have that. And it just speaks to how ill-prepared I was to juggle these difficult internal life struggles that we all face while also navigating everyday life. But it wasn't until the second semester of my junior year when things got really bad. I was returning back from a semester abroad from living in Madrid, which was incredible, but I had this rude awakening when I got back to campus in LA, which was that life goes on and people can be very happy without me. And though I, of course, knew this, because of how fragile I was, it really ended up sending me into a terrible tailspin that almost cost me my life. I was in a fraternity in college, and for me, that was a great decision because it provided friends as well as role models and a support system. But one night, after one of our chapters got out, I found myself heading home to a pretty awful living situation. I was just living with someone I was not a fan of, to say the least. Meanwhile, I knew all my friends and fellow fraternity brothers were going home to homes that they shared with one another. And again, I felt totally alone and left out. I was questioning my worth and impact on life to the point where I was moments away from ending it all. I was driving home down this large hill from between campus and where I was living at the time. And deliberately, I undid my seatbelt. I typed up half of a fake text message, and I decided to press a little bit harder on the gas pedal while steering my car towards a large cement divider. I had enough. I was so tired of feeling this constant pain from within and always questioning every thought that came into my head. I lost sense of what was real, what was fake, and what was merely my skewed, distorted perception of reality. And still to this day, I can't tell you why I didn't go through with it that night, but I'm very glad that I didn't. Because over these years and throughout all these experiences, I've learned that so much of the self-doubt and lack of self-love and the poor confidence to all the way to the furthest extreme of wanting to take your own life, so much of that is avoidable. Now, not completely, I get that, but to a large extent, yes, it is. Though I acknowledge we're human and we're going to have tough times and feel bad and sad and all of that. But so many of us lack the ability to manage our feelings while keeping up with the responsibilities of everyday life that we lose grasp of who we are throughout the juggling act of just staying afloat. Life doesn't stop and wait for you to get your shit together so you can catch up. So because of that, we need to make sure we're helping each other in the moment, but also helping each other to prepare for when things do go south, because they will. And more of us need to know how to cope, how to survive, so we can come out of these moments of mental illness stronger than we were before. And I truly am so optimistic that together, by having these conversations and creating a platform of love and support, we can really have a massive impact on what our future looks like. And so, again, thank you all so much for tuning in today and for giving me this opportunity to speak with you and share a little bit about my why and my story with every single one of you. I hope my words today have brought some level of comfort to those of you who may need it. And for those of you who are doing well, I applaud you for taking the time out of your day to listen to an average guy like me share his story, because it takes two to be part of a conversation. So thank you for your participation as well. As I like to say, conversations need to be had, stigmas need to be shattered. So let's see what we can do together. Be sure to tune in next week for our Valentine's Day episode, where I discuss my pursuit of self-love while also trying to date. You're going to learn a lot about me, I promise you that. So thank you so much. Take care, and until next time.